The rain tapped against the cracked window of Ryan's tiny apartment. A gentle rhythm that echoed through the crumpled space. The ceiling paint was peeling, the mattress on the floor sagged in the middle. And the kitchenette barely had enough room for her to turn around, but it was hers, and that was enough. She sat cross legged on the mattress, textbook and notebook scattered around her like debris from a storm. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, loose strands falling into her eyes as she scribbled notes in her frantic. Tiny letters, lips moving silently as she repeated formulas to herself. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She'd used her last few euros to buy groceries earlier that week, enough to last her till payday. The part time job at the cafe wasn't glamorous. She scrubbed tables, served pastries. And endured the endless clink of coffee cups against saucers. Her fingers were often blistered, and her feet ached so badly by the end of her shift that she almost crawled home. But she didn't complain because this was what she chose. This was her new life. Her phone was beside her. She glanced at the screen. Her hands automatically went to Taehyung's chat, the same message she'd been reading over and over again for the past month. Ryan's fingers tightened around the pen until her knuckles turned white. She locked the phone without replying and tossed it onto her pillow. Her heart was pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She stared at the ceiling, taking slow, shaky breaths. The wedding, her wedding, or the one that should have been, if she'd stayed, if she'd caved. She saw the photos on the social media the other day. The man they'd chosen stood next to another girl, her smile stiff, her face plastered with makeup, and an expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Vine felt sorry for the girl. She knew what it was like to be a pawn in someone else's game. With a bitter exhale, she snapped her textbook shut and stood up, stretching her sore limbs. She needed air. Grabbing her coat, she slipped out of the apartment and into the quiet, dimly lit street. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles reflecting the flickering glow of street lights. Paris was still alive even this late, couples laughing as they walked hand in hand. Musician playing soft melodies under bridges, the smell of fresh bread wafting from bakeries. Vine stuffed her hands in her pocket and started walking. The cafe she worked at was a 20-minute stroll from her apartment. But she always took the long way home after her shift, enjoying the quiet moments when the city felt like it belonged only to her. Her legs were tired and her shoes squelched with water from an earlier downpour, but she didn't care. The night air smelled of rain and earth, and for the first time all day she let herself breathe. She passed the small bookstore she always lingered in on weekends. The old women who owned it waving at her from the window as she rearranged a stack of vintage novels. Vine smiled and waved back, feeling the ache in her chest loosen, if only slightly. Her life was small now, just work, study, and quiet nights spent with her books, but she was building something. She was free. And she didn't regret her choice. At least that's what she told herself. She rounded the corner onto her street, the soles of her shoes scraping against the wet pavement. The street lamp buzzed overhead, casting a dim, yellowish glow on the cobblestones. And then she heard it, a voice she hadn't heard in a month, a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Her entire body locked up. She froze in place, heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought she might collapse. Her breath hitched, her fingers trembling violently as her eyes went wide. Slowly, as if afraid it might break her, she turned around, and there he was, Taehyung. Standing a few feet away, chest heaving like he'd run through the city to find her. His hair was damp. Sticking to his forehead, and his coat clung to his frame, water dripping from the hem. He looked like a mess, but his eyes, those same eyes she used to get lost in, were locked onto hers with a desperation that made her knees weak. Vine's lips parted, but no sound came out. She blinked, thinking maybe she was hallucinating from exhaustion, from hunger, from heartbreak that still lingered like a shadow. But he didn't disappear. He took a shaky step towards her, his voice rough, almost hesitant. As if afraid she might disappear if he moved too fast. His breath was uneven, the rise and fall of his chest erratic. And his hands curled into trembling fists by his sides. The rain had soaked through his coat. Droplets sliding down the curve of his jaw, his hair plastered against his forehead. Vine didn't move. For a moment she couldn't. She just stood there, her mind struggling to catch up with reality. This wasn't a dream. Taehyung was here, in Paris, standing before her like a ghost from a past she had tried so hard to bury. Her fingers twitched at her sides, her heart a lead weight in her chest. Then, without a word, she turned around. And walked away. Taehyung's breath hitched. Her pace quickened. She didn't stop. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let him drag her back into a life she had fought so hard to escape. But then her steps faltered. The desperation in his voice struck something deep within her, something raw and aching. Her shoulders tensed as she came to a halt, fist clenched so tightly her nails bit into her palms. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the streetlights casting a dim glow over the empty road. She stood still, her back to him, every muscle in her body wound tight. A few heavy seconds passed before Taehyung took another step closer. I know. His voice was quieter now, cautious. I know you hate me right now. I know I hurt you. Wyan didn't turn around. But you have to understand. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. Running away was never the answer, Wyan. We acted on impulse. We let our pain cloud our judgment. Our parents. Stop. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it sliced through the night like a blade. Taehyung hesitated, but he didn't stop. Our parents love us, Wyan, he said, his tone pleading. They just they just didn't understand us, but they would have if we had stayed, if we had fought the right way. Wyan let out a bitter, humorous laugh. Maybe your parents love you, Taehyung, she interrupted. Her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. Maybe they would have understood. Maybe they would have listened. But mine, She turned around now, eyes burning with something between anger and heartbreak. Taehyung froze. She could see it in the way his expression shifted, the confusion, the denial, the desperate need to argue. Why, that's not true. Yes, it is, she snapped for the first time that night. Taehyung's expression crumbled, pain flickering in his eyes. Wine, please. No, she whispered again, stepping back. She could see the devastation on his face, the way his lips parted as if he wanted to argue. But she knew he wouldn't, because deep down he knew she meant it. For a long moment they just stood there. The rain had stopped, the city was quiet. And for the first time, Vine felt like she was finally standing in the life she had chosen, alone but free. Taehyung swallowed hard, his hands shaking at his sides. So that's it. His voice was barely audible. You're just going to stay here? She nodded once. He let out a shaky breath, his eyes glistening. Her heart clenched. She forced herself to smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. I know. And then, before he could say anything else, before he could make this any harder, she turned around and walked away. But one thing she heard him yell was, she smiled sadly to herself. Hey guys, there's going to be one last part. I know it's frustrating, but please bear with me. Also, guys, I'm not trying to promote anything like running away from house from this video, but I'm trying to make you understand different realities of the world. And yeah, I hope you take it positively. Also, like, share, subscribe, comment down what you think about the video. You can follow me on Instagram only at lustrous ffs, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, bye bye.